What happens when Hollywood's tough guy meets a question he refuses to answer on live morning television? Last night on Good Morning America, Mark Wahlberg and Michael Strahan went head-to-head in an argument so explosive that security had to intervene. It only took 30 seconds for a friendly conversation to turn into absolute chaos. Before we dive into this insanity, smash that subscribe button right now. We bring you daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals, the confrontations networks try to bury, and the drama that explodes when celebrities can't handle the heat. Last night's Good Morning America was supposed to be Mark Wahlberg promoting his new action film. The producers had it all planned out. They'd talk about the movie, maybe discuss his workout routine that people love hearing about, share some funny behind-the-scenes stories, and send him on his way. The set was bright and welcoming. With that signature GMA look, the studio audience was pumped with energy and ready for a fun morning. And Michael Strahan seemed prepared for what everyone assumed would be a typical morning show conversation about movies, fitness, and Hollywood life. But something was different from the very moment Mark walked out onto that set. His body language was tense, his shoulders tight, his smile forced in a way that anyone watching closely could immediately see. He wasn't in his usual upbeat, energetic mood that he typically brings to these appearances. The audience applauded as Mark made his entrance, and Michael Strahan greeted him with his signature enthusiasm, that big, infectious smile that's made him one of morning television's most beloved hosts. They shook hands firmly, but the handshake was brief, almost perfunctory, lacking the warmth these greetings usually have. Mark sat down across from Michael at the interview table, adjusting his position in the chair several times like he couldn't quite get comfortable, like something was already bothering him. The audience continued their applause, and Mark gave a quick wave in acknowledgement, but his energy was notably off compared to his usual appearances. "Mark Wahlberg, welcome back to GMA, brother," Michael said, his voice warm and genuinely friendly, trying to set a positive tone. "Always great to have you here, man. Seriously, how've you been? What's been going on?" "Good, Michael, good," Mark replied. But his tone was clipped, shorter than usual. Not the relaxed, talkative Mark that people have seen on countless talk shows over the years. Busy. You know how it is. Always moving from one thing to the next. Michael nodded enthusiastically, diving into his prepared questions with that professional ease he's developed over years of doing this. They started talking about Mark's new film, the intense physical training regimen he went through to prepare for the role, the dangerous stunts he insisted on performing himself despite the studio wanting to use doubles. Mark answered the questions, but something was off. His responses were brief, almost guarded, like he was holding back. He wasn't giving those fun, detailed, animated stories that make for great television segments. He was giving the absolute bare minimum, just enough to technically answer each question without offering anything extra. Michael, being the experienced professional he is, tried several times to loosen things up, to get Mark to open up. He asked about Mark's famous early morning workout routine, knowing that Mark's legendary for waking up at absolutely crazy hours to train, something that always gets people talking. Mark talked about it, explaining his schedule in basic terms, but again his answers were short and lacking his usual passion and detail. Where he'd normally launch into funny stories about dragging his training partners out of bed or the crazy things he does to stay motivated, now he just gave facts, numbers, basic information. Then Michael shifted the conversation, glancing down at his notes for just a moment, before looking back up at Mark. And this exact moment, is where everything started to unravel. "So Mark, I want to ask you about something that's been talked about quite a bit recently. Something I think we need to address. Your past. Obviously, you've had this incredible transformation story, going from troubled youth on the streets to one of Hollywood's biggest and most successful stars. It's an amazing journey. But there's been renewed discussion lately about some of the incidents from your past, particularly regarding the assault charges from when you were younger. Serious assault charges. You've apologized before publicly, But some people, including some victims, are saying those apologies weren't enough, that there needs to be more accountability, more than just words. What do you say to that? How do you respond to people who feel your apologies haven't gone far enough? The change in Mark's face was instant and dramatic, like someone had flipped a switch. His jaw clenched visibly, the muscles in his face tightening. His eyes went from neutral, maybe slightly bored, to absolutely cold in a heartbeat. He shifted forward aggressively in his chair, his entire body tensing up like a fighter getting ready for a match. The atmosphere in the studio changed so quickly, it was almost shocking. You could feel it in the air. Why are you bringing that up right now, Michael? Mark's voice was low but intense, controlled but clearly holding back anger. Seriously, why? I'm here to talk about my film. That's what I was told this appearance was about. That's why I'm sitting in this chair. Michael didn't back down even slightly. His voice remained steady, professional, but there was steel underneath it. I'm bringing it up because it's part of your story, Mark. It's a significant part of your journey. It's something people want to know about. People want to understand. You've built your entire career on this image of being authentic, of being real, of keeping it real with people. So I think it's completely fair to ask how you've grown from those experiences, how you've changed, what you've learned, how I've grown. Mark's voice was getting noticeably louder now, his Boston accent becoming more pronounced as his emotions rose. How I've grown? I've spent decades, literally decades, growing from those experiences. I've talked about it publicly many times. I've apologized repeatedly. I've done the work. The real work. Not just the public performance of it. I don't need to keep relitigating my entire past on morning television every time I try to promote a movie. But Mark, with all due respect, Michael pressed forward, and you could see in his expression that he wasn't going to let this go, that he'd come prepared for this confrontation. Some of the victims, the actual people who were hurt by your actions, have publicly said they never received personal apologies directly from you. There are people who were harmed by your violent actions who feel like you've just moved on with your life, become this huge star, made millions of dollars, and never actually made proper amends to them. Don't they deserve to be heard? Don't they deserve more than just public statements? Mark stood up slightly in his seat, his imposing physical presence becoming more apparent, his face reddening with a combination of anger and embarrassment. You don't know what conversations I've had privately, Michael. You don't have any idea. You don't know what I've done behind closed doors, what outreach I've made, what attempts I've tried. You're sitting here making sweeping assumptions based on what? A few articles you read? Some Twitter threads from people who've never met me? You're acting like you know my entire life story when you don't know anything. The audience was completely silent now, frozen. This was absolutely not the fun morning show segment they'd expected when they came to the studio today. People were exchanging nervous glances, some looking genuinely uncomfortable. Michael remained outwardly calm, his years of broadcast experience showing, but his voice took on a more serious, harder tone. I'm asking, based on public statements, Mark, based on actual interviews where victims, real people who you hurt, have publicly said they haven't heard from you personally, that these apologies you talk about were press releases and public statements, not actual person-to-person communication. I'm giving you a chance to address that right now, right here, to set the record straight. A chance? Mark's voice was sharp now, cutting through the air like a knife. This isn't about giving me a fair chance. This is about you ambushing me with this topic on live television. If you really wanted to have this serious conversation with me, you should have told me beforehand what you were planning to ask. You should have given me notice. I would have told you no. I would have said I'm not coming on the show if that's what you want to discuss. It's not an ambush to ask about your public history, Michael responded, his voice steady, but you could hear the edge creeping in. You're a public figure. You've made your life public. This is part of your documented history. And if you've really done the work you claim you've done, if you've really changed as much as you say you have, then this should be a conversation you're willing and able to have without getting defensive. Willing to have? Mark was fully standing now, no longer even pretending to sit calmly and have a normal interview. His body language was aggressive, confrontational. I've had this exact conversation 1,000 times. Literally 1,000 times. I've addressed it in interviews. I've talked about it in my book. I've been completely open about my past mistakes and the work I've done to become a better person. But you know what? I don't owe you or anyone else a televised performance of my redemption on your morning show. I don't owe you that. Michael stood up too now, not backing down even an inch, matching Mark's energy. His professional composure was slipping. You could see it in his face. This isn't about a performance, Mark. Nobody wants a performance. This is about genuine accountability. It's about actually acknowledging that your actions decades ago had real, lasting consequences for real people whose lives were affected. And those people, those victims, they deserve more than just, I've moved on with my life and become successful. They deserve actual acknowledgement of their pain. Accountability? Mark's face was dark red now, the veins in his neck visible, his voice booming through the entire studio loud enough that the audio levels were probably peaking. I've been accountable. I've been accountable for years. I've lived with my past every single day of my life. It's not something I've forgotten about or swept under the rug. I've worked actively to be better, to do better, to use my platform for good. But what you're doing right now, Michael, this isn't journalism. This is grandstanding. This is you trying to make yourself look righteous by going after me in front of your audience. The tension in the studio was absolutely suffocating now. Crew members were frozen behind cameras, unsure if they should cut to commercial or keep rolling. The audience sat in stunned, uncomfortable silence. Michael's co-hosts at the news desk looked at each other with wide eyes, clearly not knowing how to intervene or if they even should intervene. I'm not grandstanding, Michael said, and his voice was rising now to match Mark's intensity. I'm doing my job as a journalist. I'm asking questions that need to be asked. Questions that your victims want answered. Questions that the public deserves answers to. And the fact that you're getting this defensive, this angry, tells me that maybe you haven't done as much self-reflection and work as you claim you have. Maybe I haven't done the work? Mark stepped even closer to where Michael was standing, his finger pointing accusingly. Are you kidding me right now? You don't know anything about me, Michael. You don't know the work I've done behind the scenes. You don't know the therapy I've been through for years. You don't know the private amends I've made to people. You're standing here judging my entire character, my entire journey, based on incomplete information and public speculation, and you have the absolute nerve to question whether I've done enough work on myself? I'm standing here asking you to address legitimate concerns from people you harmed. Michael fired back immediately, not missing a beat, his voice hard and unyielding. And instead of actually answering the question, instead of addressing those concerns, you're attacking me for having the courage to ask it. That's exactly what people are talking about when they say you haven't fully taken responsibility. You're proving their point right now. I'm attacking you? Mark's voice was incredulous now, almost laughing, but with absolutely zero humor in it. You brought up my worst moments, the lowest points of my life, on live television without any warning, and I'm the one who's attacking? That's rich, Michael. That's really, really rich. That's some twisted logic right there. You knew this topic could come up, Michael insisted firmly, his voice not wavering. You're a smart guy. You knew. You're promoting a film about a tough guy who has to face his demons and confront his past. The parallels are obvious. The themes are identical. How could you possibly not expect this question to come up in interviews? Expect it? Mark shook his head vigorously, his hands gesturing wildly now, his entire body involved in expressing his frustration. Yeah, sure, I expected you might ask generally about redemption themes, about growth, about how the film relates to second chances. I didn't expect you to. Put me on trial in front of millions of people watching at home. I didn't expect you to appoint yourself as judge and jury over my entire life. Nobody's putting you on trial, Michael said. But his voice had a sharp edge now too, his own frustration and anger starting to show through. We're having a conversation. Or at least, I'm trying to have one. You're the one who's turning this into a massive confrontation because you can't handle being asked difficult questions. I'm turning this into a confrontation? Mark's voice hit a new volume level, echoing off every wall in the studio. You started this, Michael. You made this choice when you decided to ambush me. You decided to go there, so don't act all shocked and surprised when I push back hard against it. Don't play innocent. Michael took a visible breath, trying to regain some control of the rapidly deteriorating situation. Mark, look, I think we both need to take a step back here for a second. Let's both just calm down. And, don't tell me to calm down, Mark interrupted sharply, his voice like a whip. Don't you dare tell me to calm down, Michael. You don't get to attack someone's character on live television and then tell them to calm down when they defend themselves. That's not how this works. I'm not attacking your character. Michael's voice was strained now, clearly frustrated and struggling to maintain composure. I'm literally just asking you to talk about your documented past and how you've addressed it with the people you hurt. That's not an attack. That's a legitimate journalistic question. It's the way you asked it, Mark shot back immediately. The setup, the framing, the tone, the whole approach. You made it crystal clear what you think of me before I even had a chance to respond. You've already decided in your mind that I'm not good enough, that my apologies aren't sincere enough, that nothing I've done or will ever do will be enough to satisfy people like you. That's not true at all, Michael protested, but there was less conviction in his voice now. That's not what I think. I'm giving you an opportunity to speak directly to these concerns. You know what the real problem is here? Mark was pacing now, moving back and forth on the set like a caged animal. The real problem is that people like you will never, ever let people like me move forward with our lives. It doesn't matter how much genuine work I do. It doesn't matter how much I change and grow as a person. It doesn't matter how many years go by. You'll always want to drag me back to my absolute lowest point and make me answer for it over and over and over again, like it just happened yesterday. If you'd actually addressed it properly and sincerely, the first time, Michael started to say, but Mark cut him off immediately. I did address it. Mark's voice cracked with a mixture of emotion and rage. I did address it, but it's never enough for people. There's always someone like you who wants more, who wants a bigger apology, a more dramatic display of remorse, a more public show of guilt. And you know what? I'm done. I'm completely done performing my guilt for people's entertainment. I'm done being your morality play. This isn't entertainment. Michael's voice was hard now, angry. This is about real harm you cause to real people. And if you can't handle being asked about it, maybe you haven't changed as much as you think you have. That last sentence was the final straw. Mark stopped pacing and turned to face Michael directly, his face a mask of rage. You know what, Michael? Screw this. Screw this whole thing. I don't need to stand here and be lectured by you about my past. I don't need your judgment or your moral superiority. Nobody's claiming moral superiority, Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction now. The situation had spiraled completely out of control. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation. An honest conversation? Mark laughed, bitterly. This isn't honest. This is a hit job. You brought me here under false pretenses, waited until we were live, and then went for the throat. That's not honest. That's cowardly. Michael's eyes flashed with anger at that. Don't you dare call me a coward. I asked you a legitimate question to your face, on live television, with millions watching. There's nothing cowardly about that. What's cowardly is refusing to answer, getting defensive, and trying to make yourself the victim here. The victim? Mark's voice was dangerously quiet now, which was somehow more intense than the yelling. I'm not playing the victim, but I'm also not going to stand here and be your punching bag so you can score points with your audience. This isn't about scoring points. Michael was shouting now too, his professional composure completely shattered. This is about you taking responsibility for your actions. Real responsibility. Not just PR apologies and moving on with your life while your victims still suffer. You don't know what my victims want, Mark fired back instantly. You don't speak for them. You're using them as props in your moral crusade against me. That's what's disgusting here. The studio was in complete chaos now. Producers were frantically talking into headsets. The other co-hosts were trying to signal for a commercial break. The audience looked genuinely frightened. This had gone from a tough interview to a full-blown meltdown, and everyone could feel it. I'm not using anyone as props. Michael's voice was shaking with anger now. I'm giving voice to concerns that have been raised by multiple people who you hurt. And instead of addressing those concerns, you're attacking me for bringing them up. That says everything anyone needs to know. It says I'm not going to be ambushed on your show, Mark said coldly, reaching down to pull off his microphone. It says I have enough self-respect to walk away when I'm being disrespected. You're walking away? Michael asked, his voice dripping with disdain. Of course you are. That's what you do, right? When things get uncomfortable, when someone calls you out, you just leave. Just like you've left everything else in your past behind. Mark stopped removing his microphone and looked at Michael with pure fury in his eyes. You want to go there? Really? Let's talk about your past, Michael. Let's talk about some of your choices, some of your mistakes. How would you like that aired out on live TV? My past has nothing to do with this, Michael said, but you could see he was rattled now. This conversation is about you and your actions. Right, because you're perfect, Mark said sarcastically. You've never made mistakes. You've never hurt anyone. You're the perfect person to sit in judgment of everyone else. I never claimed to be perfect. Michael's voice was defensive now. But I'm not the one with assault charges in my past. I'm not the one who hurt people and then tried to move on without making real amends. You don't know what amends I've made. Mark was yelling again, full volume. You don't know anything about my life beyond what you read in articles written by people who've never met me. You're making assumptions and presenting them as facts. And that's not journalism. That's gossip dressed up as news. Michael opened his mouth to respond, clearly ready with another comeback. But Mark held up his hand forcefully, cutting him off before he could speak. No, I'm done talking. I'm not doing this anymore. This entire thing was a mistake. Coming on this show today was a huge mistake, and I should have trusted my gut when something felt off this morning. He ripped off his microphone completely now, pulling it roughly off his shirt. The wire got tangled for a moment in his collar before he freed it with an aggressive yank and dropped it on the chair beside him. The sound of the microphone hitting the hard surface echoed through the completely silent studio, amplified by the tension in the air. Mark, wait, please. One of the other co-hosts tried to intervene, standing up from the news desk, her voice gentle and soothing, clearly trying to de-escalate before this got even worse. Let's just take a breath. We can take a commercial break and talk about this, quote. No, Mark said firmly, looking at her with slightly softer eyes but still resolute. I appreciate you trying to help. I really do. But I'm done here. I'm finished. I was brought here under completely false pretenses, ambushed on live television with millions watching, and I'm not going to stand here and take it anymore. I'm not going to be anyone's punching bag. He turned back to Michael one final time, and the look he gave him was pure contempt. You wanted your big moment, Michael? Your viral moment that everyone will be talking about? Congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted. But don't you dare pretend this was about actual journalism or genuine accountability or helping victims get closure. This was about you trying to look tough and righteous by publicly going after me. And honestly, that's more pathetic and cowardly than anything I've ever done in my entire life. Michael's face was deep red with a mixture of anger, embarrassment, and maybe something else. Get out then. If you can't handle being asked tough questions like an adult, if you can't face your past, then leave. Run away like you always do. Show everyone who you really are. I'm not running away, Mark said coldly, his voice like ice cutting through the studio. I'm making a conscious choice not to participate in this circus, this ambush, this character assassination anymore. There's a massive difference between running and choosing not to engage with dishonest tactics. And with that final statement, Mark Wahlberg turned sharply and walked off the Good Morning America set with determined strides. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate, purposeful, echoing loudly through the studio that was so quiet you could literally hear a pin drop. The cameras followed him robotically as he moved through the set, past crew members who stood completely stunned with their mouths hanging open, past the frozen audience who sat in shocked silence, heading directly toward the exit without hesitation. Michael stood there in the middle of the set, his chest heaving with heavy breaths, his hands shaking slightly, watching Mark leave. His co-hosts tried desperately to say something to him, to console him or advise him, but he wasn't listening to any of them. His eyes were locked on Mark's retreating form. The whole studio was in absolute shock, nobody knowing quite what to do or say or how to process what they'd just witnessed. Mark reached the large exit door and pushed through it forcefully, without even glancing back, disappearing from view completely. The door swung shut behind him with a heavy, final thud that seemed to punctuate the entire confrontation. And that's when the full reality of what just happened seemed to hit everyone at once. The silence was deafening. The cameras stayed on the empty space where Mark had been for a few more seconds, before finally cutting away, but not before capturing one last shot of Michael's face. It showed a complex mixture of anger, vindication, embarrassment, and maybe just a touch of regret or second-guessing. The interview was over. The confrontation had reached its dramatic conclusion. Mark Wahlberg had walked off Good Morning America, and nobody who witnessed it, whether in person or watching at home, would ever forget the raw intensity, the genuine anger, and the complete breakdown of what was supposed to be just another morning talk show interview promoting a movie.